Have you ever really stopped to think about how network devices, right out of the box, get to know each other? I mean, they don't exactly exchange business cards, right? Nope. They use something way cooler and a whole lot faster. So today, let's dive into this digital first handshake.
All right, picture this. You've got a switch, a router, and a brand new IP phone. You plug them all into your network. So they're all physically connected. But how do they actually learn about their immediate neighbors? How does that switch figure out, hey, there's a phone on port 5 and a router on port 24? That's the big problem we need to solve right here.
Because think about it, without some kind of automatic discovery, your network is basically just a room full of silent strangers. And for things to work smoothly, for troubleshooting, for management, even for cool features like voice VLANs to actually function, these devices need a protocol. They need a shared language to introduce themselves at the most basic level. And that, my friends, is where Layer 2 discovery protocols come into the picture. Okay, so to solve this whole strangers on a network problem, we've got two main messengers, two protocols that do this job beautifully, just in slightly different ways. So let's meet them. We're talking about CDP and LLDP. First up, we have CDP, which stands for Cisco Discovery Protocol. Now, this one's the original, the OG. It was created by Cisco specifically for Cisco devices. The best way to think about it, it's like a private club with a secret handshake. If you're in the club, communication is absolutely seamless. It's easy, it just works. And then, on the other side of the coin, you've got LLDP. That's the Link Layer Discovery Protocol. This is the industry standard answer to CDP. It's like the universal translator, right? The public handshake that everyone understands and agrees on. It doesn't matter who made the device. If it can speak LLDP, it can introduce itself to pretty much anyone else out there. So this really brings us to the most critical difference between that private club and the public handshake. It's a classic battle in the tech world, right? Proprietary versus open standard. The big question is, who can they actually talk to? And this right here is the fundamental divide. See, CDP is Cisco's native tongue. So if you're in an all-Cisco shop, it's fantastic. It just works. But the moment you introduce a device from, say, another manufacturer, well, that device isn't going to understand a single word. LLDP, on the other hand, is built exactly for this real-world scenario of mixed networks. It's how a Cisco switch can talk to an Avaya phone and tell it exactly which VLAN to use for voice traffic. That's what makes everything just work. And this choice, it has real business implications. We're talking about the difference between being locked into one vendor and having the flexibility to pick the best hardware for the job, no matter what the brand is. This also reveals a really key difference in their whole philosophy. Cisco basically assumes, hey, you bought our gear, so you want to be in our ecosystem. So they turn CDP on by default. Simple. But the open standard LLDP, it makes zero assumptions about your network. It's off by default, which means you, the administrator, have to make a conscious choice to turn it on. You actually have to opt in. All right, so we've covered who they can talk to, but what are they actually saying to each other? Let's get into the real nuts and bolts of their conversations. Okay, so under the hood, they actually share a common structure for their messages. It's something called a TLV. That stands for type, length, and value. Just think of it like a standardized label for a piece of data. The type says, hey, this is an IP address. The length says, and that address is this many characters long. And the value? Well, that's the actual address itself. It's a super, super efficient way to package up and exchange information. So what kind of information is packed inside these TLVs? Well, they both share the absolute basics, the device ID, the IP address, and which port they're plugged into. But you gotta notice the key differences here. CDP will tell you the specific hardware platform, like the exact model number of the switch. LLDP, on the other hand, is a bit more generic, but it tells you something really important, the device's capabilities. Is it a router? Is it a switch? Is it both? In a mixed vendor environment, that kind of information is absolutely crucial. They also differ in, well, how often they talk. By default, LLDP is definitely the chattier of the two. It sends out its advertisements every 30 seconds, just announcing its presence to the world. CDP, it's a little more relaxed, only checking in once every 60 seconds. And that frequency ties directly into something called the hold time. This is basically how long a device will remember its neighbor after it stops hearing from it. So because LLDP is so chatty, it has a shorter hold time, just 120 seconds. If a device doesn't hear an LLDP packet for 2 minutes, poof, it assumes that neighbor is gone. CDP, being a bit more patient, gives a little more leeway with a 180-second timer.
So how do they send these messages out if they don't know who's listening? Well, they basically shout it out to a special group address. It's called a multicast address. But, and this is the crucial part, they shout to different addresses. This ensures that only the devices listening for CDP will even bother to process CDP packets, and only devices listening for LLDP will pay attention to its packets. It's like they're having two totally separate conversations in the exact same room.
Now, for anyone out there actually managing a network, this gives you a quick look at the practical side of things. Remember how LLDP is off by default? Well, you have to enable it. And the key thing to remember is that it's a two-step process. First, you enable it globally with the command LLDP run. But you're not done. Then, you have to go into each specific interface and explicitly tell it to both transmit and receive LLDP messages. It gives you really granular control over what's happening.
Okay, so we've covered the what, the who, and the how. This brings us to the million-dollar question for anyone building or managing a network. Which one should you actually use?
Honestly, the decision is pretty straightforward. Here's the bottom line. If your entire network is Cisco, top to bottom, just stick with CDP. It's the path of least resistance. It's already on, and it just works. But the second you introduce devices from other vendors, LLDP becomes absolutely essential. It is the only way to guarantee that everybody can talk to each other. And for specific things like IP phones, you just have to check with the vendor. A Cisco phone is going to expect CDP, but a whole lot of others are going to rely on LLDP to get their network settings. So let's just end with this thought. We've seen how a proprietary protocol like CDP can be super simple and really effective inside its own little bubble. But we've also seen how an open standard like LLDP provides that universal interoperability that our modern, incredibly diverse networks demand. And it really makes you wonder, right? As everything becomes more interconnected, is there really a long-term future for any kind of private club on the network? It's a fascinating question to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this one.